on Chadaratma to help out with this difficult verse, possibly. So be prepared. So nice to see you, especially during Kartik. I'm used to seeing for 2 years. 16 and 17, I had the privilege of being in Vrindavan and spending time with Chadaratma. And of course, he was on Indradumna Swami's parikram. And I ran into Chadaratma in an alley and he walks up to me, and the first words out of his mouth are very appropriate words. "What are you doing here?" Which was really a wake-up call for me because I hadn't been there very much. And by saying that, it kind of woke me up. And then we had some nice times together. And my old friend Henry is here. It's hard to describe the amount of devotional service Henry has done so quietly in this life, from serving all the devotees to hosting Yamuna when she wrote one of her most famous cookbooks, to hosting Bhakti True Swami and Tamal Krishna and everyone else, and taking care of Braja Bihari. And behind this, there's some of us do devotional service out in the public in which we get appreciated and praised and blah, 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 and get our false ego stroked. And some of us do devotional service very quietly behind the scenes. So when I compare myself to Henry, I consider myself, I'm the hare and he's the tortoise, and we know who won the race. So glad to see you, Henry. And Andrea is here, not far from me in Gainesville. When I give class, it's always nice to have her here because her smile encourages me that there's a slight chance my jokes are working. So that's very encouraging, because if they don't work, you know what it's like to do stand-up and no one laughs? It's just a terrible day. Okay. With that, we shall begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. King Yayati achieves liberation. Basta. Text 3. Bastaiko vane kashatid vichanvan priyam atmana dadarshkupe pitanam sav karma vasagam ajam. While wandering in the forest, eating to satisfy his senses, Ahigo by chance approached a well in which he saw a she-goat standing helplessly, having fallen into it by the influence of the result of fruitive activities. Now, to put this in context, sometimes in the Bhagavatam, stories are told in allegory. Like, for example, in the 4th canto, the story of Puranjana, he was a king who got very attached. So when Narada Muni preaches to him, he begins with this amazing verse. He says, Raja, O king, once there was a king. The meaning, I'm talking about you, but it's too difficult for you to understand it. So I'm going to talk about someone else. But understand, Raja, king, O king, it's really you. Same thing going on here. It's a very useful literary technique. And we do it in our own outreach, where we're with someone and we don't walk up to people and say to them, you know, you are a mudha, you are a fool. I mean, every once in a while, it becomes necessary, but that's very, very rare. Rather, we talk about other people who are fools. And there's a saying, if the shoe fits, wear it. So that's what's going on here. Now I'm going to give a little more context and then go into some of the purport. This ninth canto, for me, is one of the toughest cantos to read. Now, many devotees will tell me, no, the toughest canto is the fifth canto. And I'm glad I'm the director of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. We spend a lot of time on fifth canto issues. I'm very glad during questions, when we finish questions about this verse, to talk about that. But, and even Bhakti Vinod Thakur had said that the fifth canto is a little, some of it is allegorical. Some of the descriptions of hell are overstated in order for the common people to be kind of shaken up about sinful life. But so the fifth canto is also, has some parts of it maybe allegorical, some parts real. Some of the Bhagavatam stories are allegorical, some are real stories. This is an allegorical story. Now, why is a ninth canto like this? The ninth canto really digs deep. I have had women tell me, oh God, I hate the ninth canto. Because the ninth canto, it kind of attacks the nature of women in ways that are very difficult for somebody reading it to tolerate. But what is often missed is the ninth canto is equally attacking the nature of men. And in this case, it's equally attacking both natures. Because King Yati, look at this. He was cursed and to lose his sexual prowess, and he become an old man, and he traded his youth to his son just so he could go and enjoy some more. It doesn't look good for him either. So the ninth canto is an equal opportunity criticizer. So for those women who read it and are somewhat disturbed by it, don't feel bad. The men are equally attacked. The ninth canto is going into our darker natures, our side of us that, we all have an angel and devil on our shoulders. And it's going after that devil part. Why? Why is the ninth canto doing that? Well, the ninth canto isn't doing it to join that famous Jewish and Catholic travel agency. That travel agency is called Guilt Trip. And anybody brought up Jewish or Catholic has been traveling with that travel agency of Guilt Trip. So the ninth canto is not doing this to lay a guilt trip on us. It's doing it for a much more sublime, important, and wonderful reason. And those who can count to 10 will immediately know the reason. It's because the next canto is a 10th canto. And in order to understand the 10th canto, we need to be somewhat purified. Now, Prabhupada, the idea is you never read the 10th canto to do all 9. Some raise a question, well, the Krishna book was one of the first books Prabhupada put out. How is that? Because when Prabhupada wrote the Krishna book with his special brilliance, really special brilliance, he incorporated the lessons of all 9 cantos into it. Otherwise, somebody who jumps to the 10th canto will find Krishna's romantic pastimes to be very mundane and ordinary. So you need all 9th cantos first. So we build up all the cantos. Then we get to the 9th canto. We go for a little bit of, as we used to say in the movement, a smashing. And it's smashing our false ego, both men and women. This is an equal opportunity smasher. Because unless we're really purified and kind of, I don't mean purified by we're perfect. I don't mean purified that we gave up all our material desires. I don't mean that at all. What I mean is purified in that we want to advance. Prabhupada said 150 times, I counted at least 150, that Krishna consciousness is a gradual process. So what counts is not how fast we're going, but what direction we're going. So it's a test to us. Are we really purified of our sense gratification? Well, the answer, and all of you who are completely purified of any sense gratification have no hint left. You can go back to sleep right now. No need to stay for any classes. Of course, some of you with your cameras off are probably sleeping right now anyway, but that's another matter. In fact, I'm assuming if you didn't bother putting on your camera, you're sleeping, so that's okay. I'm not trying to put a guilt trip on all of you, just some of you. So to continue, so the ninth canto is building up to this crescendo, and the ninth canto really digs in left and right. At one point, there's one purport. It's kind of funny. When Prabhupada wrote this, we had deprogrammers kidnapping devotees left and right. There was one of them, an infamous guy named Ted Patrick, and he would kidnap devotees. And one devotee sent me a little chat. I'm up. Very good. Okay. So he would kidnap devotees and then take the devotees and give them sleep deprivation and make them change their clothes and step on Prabhupada's books and then try to find contradictions in literature and convince the devotees to leave Krishna. And parents would pay in those times $5,000, which nowadays is like $50,000. So a huge amount of money. And so that was going on in those days. In fact, in New York Temple, there was quite a bit going on. And so devotees, we didn't have cell phones then, of course. So what to do? So all the devotees were given a secret phone number to call because they couldn't be the temple. And if they got stuck, they were to call this number. And the number was my number because I was living outside and I had an apartment in Jersey. I was going to graduate school. So they would call my number if they were kidnapped. And then if somebody got kidnapped, Romapad, who was brahmachari then, would come stay at my house and camp out for a few days, which was quite nice for me, until the phone rang. Inevitably it would ring, and then we'd plan the rescue. So this was going on. One devotee here, I was in Houston. It was 1978, and one devotee, he's Gargamuni now, but Dr. Greg then, very sincere. He was, his stepfather pulled up in front of the temple. And as his stepfather pulls up, he says, "Hey, Greg, I got to talk to you a minute." So Greg walks over to greet him. They had a somewhat decent relationship. And immediately, two men jump out of the car, grab him, and shove him in the back seat and race off. And one new brahmachari, not even initiated, was driving in a Sankirtan van, not even from the temple, visiting, but very sharp. And he saw what happened. And immediately he raced after him and yelled, "A kidnapping, a kidnapping," and raced after the van. And then another car raced after. And then I got word, and then I raced after. So they were racing through the ghetto at about 100 miles an hour. And then the devotee pulled in front of the kidnapper's car and slammed his brakes and turned sideways, blocking them. And then behind the kidnapper's car was Ted Patrick in his big limo. And then they were sandwiched between. And then the cops saw them going so fast and came up, and the devotee brahmachari got out of the car. I'm banging on the car, banging on it, let my friend out. And the cop pointed his gun at him and said, hands up. And he said, they're kidnapping my friend. So the cop points at the car, everybody out, hands up, hands up. And then I came upon the scene with some other devotees, and the cops wouldn't let us near. And Ted Patrick got out of the car, and eventually there's a whole story here. We got the devotee back, and we had some wonderful publicity from this event, wonderful publicity, very good for us. And I won't go into that detail now, but the reason I tell this story is that was going on in this time frame. And Prabhupada writes in the 9th canto, later on, he says in a purport, he talks about this. And he said, sometimes, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the purport pulled up. Sometimes parents come to me and say, is it part of your religion to break our parents' heart? Is it part of your religion to break our parents' heart? They come to Prabhupada because everyone wants their child to be a success, to become a doctor, a lawyer, or a motel keeper, or whatever they want them to be. And everyone wants them to do that. And here they are, shaved head, dancing on streets, you know, wearing what the parents see as an odd colored bed sheet and all of this. And is it in your religion to break your parents' heart? Because sometimes it was very difficult for them. So Prabhupada talks about that in a purport, how our relationships, even though we see in Prabhupada's own dealings with our parents, he was so respectful and kind, he won so many over, yet he didn't want us to be overly attached to the point where we would simply give up our devotional service. In China, when the first devotee joined, he said to Prabhupada, our culture, we're very attached to our parents. And Prabhupada talked about, you know, so are the piglets, attached to their parents. Everyone is. And the devotee then understood you have to break some of these attachments. So Prabhupada talks about breaking attachments with the parents. Herein he's talking about, in the Bhagavatam, he's talking about breaking attachment with our husband, our wives, our loved ones. In other words, the 9th canto is that canto which kind of purifies us from our attachments. Not that we're giving them up. That is not what it's saying, but just it gives us the desire to rise above them. There's a big difference between giving it all up and a desire to rise above it. All we're trying to do is get a desire. It looks like this. We have two hands are moving apart. What we want to do is they're like this, moving apart. We just changing the direction so they can move together. Not that they're like this immediately. This means all desires are given up. It's not saying that, but it's getting us really ready for the 10th canto. So when we listen to the pastimes, especially Damodar pastimes this month, and the wonderful, so many pastimes of Radha and Krishna happen in this month of Kartik. And so this is the perfect time to be reading the 9th canto, because when we get immersed in the Krishna Leela, we at least don't see it as mundane and ordinary. We understand it's spiritual, but we can't do it unless we are, not that our consciousness is purified, but that our consciousness is, and this is the key word, being purified. So the 9th canto is that canto which is purifying our our consciousness. So for you ladies, when you see ladies smash, don't feel bad. And you men, when you see men smash, don't feel bad. Remember, the 9th canto is an equal opportunity smasher. And there's a purpose and reason for it. And when I read the 9th canto, I admit sometimes things in it give me pause. And I realize it gives me pause because it's talking about me. So it's definitely a wake-up canto. We'll look at the purport here for a little bit. Here, Maharaj Yati compares himself to a he-goat and Devyani to a she-goat. And for those of you that remember, Yayati actually won his wife Devyani because she was pushed into a well by a friend and who got insulted by her, and Yayati rescued her from a well, and they got married and did not exactly live happily ever after. So this immediately you can see that this metaphor is directly talking to Devyani, because imagine a goat in a well. I mean, you were just in a well, Devyani. Did you get it? Okay, like a he-goat, a man searches for sense gratification, wandering here and there, and a woman without the shelter of a man or a husband is like a she-goat that has fallen into a well. Without being cared for by a man, a woman cannot be happy. Indeed, she is just like a she-goat that has fallen into a well and is struggling for existence. Therefore, a woman must take shelter of her father, as Devyani did when under the care of her father, Sukacharya. And then the father must give the daughter in charity to a suitable man, or suitable man should help the woman by placing her under the care of a husband. So anyway, this is talking about some of these principles of protection. When King Yayati delivered Devyani from the well, she felt great relief and requested Yati to accept her as his wife. But then Maharaj Yati accepted Devyani. He became too attached and had sex life, not only with her, but with others like Sarmista. Now, Sarmista wasn't exactly the best friend of Devyani by that point. Sarmista is the one that pushed Devyani in the well. And her penance for that was to become Devyani's maidservant. It was a penance that was her father forced on her. And then she got envious. Devyani's pregnant. I want to be pregnant. Approach Yayati. Hey, good-looking Yayati. Would you like to, you know what? And Yayati, being a red-blooded Kshatriya, said, why not? And Devyani was not happy with that. And yet, Maharaj Yati was still not satisfied. And therefore, one should retire by force from family life. And it goes on here, Prabhupada talks, eventually we have to give up family life. Now, what does that practically mean? Well, all of us have to give up family life because every one of us, guess what? Going to leave this body. So it's saying as we advance in age, we become somewhat detached. Now, it doesn't mean we all become swamis. Bhaktivinoda Thakur didn't take sannyas, but it means that we gradually add more and more Krishna. Because the secret of the Bhagavatam, and this is why the 10th canto is coming next. In the 9th canto, I got to give up something. And the 10th canto goes, no, you don't. You just have to replace it with Krishna. So 9th canto shakes you up. Oh my God, how am I going to give it up? When I met Prabhupada in Mayapur, that was almost 50 years ago, I got terrified because first I was, most of you know, but I was a science teacher in India. And at the first Mayapur festival, I went there because I heard there was food relief for refugees. There had just been a war. So I went to Mayapur. Those had been to Mayapur. There were no buildings. There was I'll show you what there was. This was it. This was the only building in Mayapur. Let me see if I can get that. Well, I need to make a little technical adjustment here for a second. This was the only building in Mayapur. which is the Bhajan Kutir of Prabhupada. It was smaller then. Every flood season, it has to get rebuilt. And that was the only thing. There was a men's tent and a women's tent and all of that. And I was terrified. And what was I terrified about? Well, first, I was speaking with Prabhupada, and we were having very interesting hypothetical conversations. What's the nature of science? What's the nature of the soul? It was good, heady topics. And then Gaur Purnima came, and Gaur Purnima was a full moon night. Full moon. And under the full moon, the most heartfelt devotee I've ever met came and approached me. And this was a good friend of Henry's, in fact. And that was the most wonderful, transcendental Yamuna. So she approached me. And Yamuna, with tears in her eyes, there was no lights there, just the full moon, said, "You are so lucky. You are so fortunate. Prabhupada is giving you all of his time." That was unusual at that time. I think I was the last devotee up until Bhakti True Swami who Prabhupada personally spent a lot of time with, because by 1972, Prabhupada had a bubble around him. The movement had thousands and thousands of disciples and 100 temples, and just like any big political leader or any of the Pope, he'll always have a bubble around him, not that anyone can walk up to him like in the early days. It's just natural, it's just practical. So, but since I was the only guest at the first Mayapur festival, and everyone was not everyone, but many were quite zealous, all in their young 20s, Prabhupada kept me with him all day to protect me. So just, boy, I needed it. And so Yamuna told me how fortunate I was. And after that, I actually started crying. I went just on my own, went for a walk behind the pandal. And the next day when Prabhupada called me in to see him, I remember what I was thinking, I'm going to have to give up. I'm engaged to be married. I have all my desires. I'm going to have to give it all up now. Just scared the bejesus out of me. Oh my God, I have to give it all up. I wasn't ready to do that. Have any of you felt that way at any time? Just not ready to give it up. So I said to Prabhupada, well, thank you for all your time talking to me, but I have to leave now. And Prabhupada said to me, some of you have heard this before, but I'll repeat it because it's such a wonderful story. Prabhupada said to me, spelling, do not talk L-E-A-V-E, talk L-I-V-E. Don't talk leave, talk live. So I said, you want me to stay here longer? Because I told him I had to go back and teach. But the truth is, I was in such a remote location that no one from the government had any idea what I was doing. If I was there or not, if I had died or not, no one would have known it. I was very, very remote. I had to take 2 trains overnight to get to Calcutta. And it was just, so I really didn't have to go back to teaching, but I said I had to. And so Prabhupada said, you should stay. I said, you want me to stay? And he goes, yes. I said, okay, I'll stay. And then Prabhupada said the most magical words to me. Good boy, like you say to your dog. So at that moment, I knew I was his dog. And then the whole discussion, we were having changed tone. And it became not just theoretical, hypothetical discussions of this and that. It became a serious discussion about sense gratification and how to rise above it. And Prabhupada said, everyone can be married. You don't have to give up your thoughts of married and family. It's just how to add Krishna, how to add Krishna. And Prabhupada would hammer me from different angles, how to add Krishna. And that's what the 9th canto is getting us ready for, how to add Krishna to our lives. So with that, I will stop here and I will ask for reflections, comments, criticisms, better jokes than I've offered, whatever you'd like to say. And maybe my dear friend and senior godbrother Chaturappa would like to add his thoughts. If you'd like to, it's optional. Okay. Anybody have anything? Or Venkata, would you like to add something? Venkata is the wonderful chaplain at Princeton University. He is the Hindu chaplain there, does amazing work, and now chaplaincy is becoming an expanded profession. So many devotee chaplains are coming in, chaplains for hospice, chaplains for university, because that means Brahmins. People approach us thinking, oh, I need some advice. I'm in existential crisis at school. Just like Arjuna had an existential crisis. Should I fight or not? Every student before exam time has existential crisis. And it's great to have a Brahmin around to give them advice. At the time of death, we need Brahmins. So Prabhupada wanted a generation of Brahmins. So some of the work Venkata does is not only acting as a Brahmin, but creating a generation of Brahmins by encouraging others to be chaplains. Venkata, anything you would like to add to this discussion today?
Hari Hari, thank you, Prabhu. Let me just clarify, I am very non-Brahminical, and I think the key thing there in what you said is acting. So if somehow or other I'm acting in a role, but by nature and qualification, I'm pretty far from being Brahminical. But thank you so much. I'm sorry I missed the earlier part of your class. I really love the idea of the emphasis in Bhakti being on adding Krishna rather than what we subtract. So that's a wonderful takeaway. I am wondering if you could speak briefly to, and again, I apologize if you've already done this, but when we read in the purports some of these, what sound like very prescriptive statements about women's roles, for instance, how much of that do you think we ought to read sort of literally and specifically, and how much of that is speaking to a broader principle that may look very different in 2021 than it did even when Prabhupada was writing his purports?
Well, that is a very good loaded question. The answer is yes. Okay, next question. Okay, well, let me do something different with that. Okay. First, there's two things. There's prescriptive, saying what we ought to do, and descriptive, saying what has been done. So some of the descriptions are certainly descriptive, not prescriptive. Now, how did Prabhupada deal with women? I am the mediator for the last year, and I'm pleased to say we're coming to, I think, a very good conclusion. But I've been the mediator signed by the GBC to deal with the issue, the non-controversial issue of women being gurus. So we deal with this, as I've been dealing every week directly with this issue. So some of the things are descriptive and some are prescriptive. And the idea here that one must eventually give up family life, meaning attachment, you may still be with your wife or husband. That's prescriptive, what we must do. Some of the descriptions of the nature of women or the nature of men, the lower side, we all have our devil side, those are descriptive. It's not telling us we must be that way, we ought to be that way. It's what we commonly see. We see things that way. So in looking at it, at how Prabhupada actually dealt, we see a woman, there's a purport, a woman should be home cooking, take care of her husband. Well, what were the overwhelming majority of women doing when Prabhupada was in the movement? They were doing Sankirtan, doing Pujari work, painting, typesetting, every conceivable service there was. And when it came time taking care of the children, Prabhupada would say, well, is there any chance your kid can go to Gurukula so you can continue your service? And so, no, we didn't run great Gurukulas, but that's a whole other subject matter. We tried, but we weren't very good at it at that time. And so Prabhupada's own, he would send devotees all over the world to do service. When devotees went to London, they figured, well, if we can just get a hold of the Beatles, so they started baking apple pies every day and sending it to Apple Records. And eventually they were kind of, George Harrison one night wandered over to the temple incognito, looked inside the storefront to see what they're doing. He was so interested to meet the devotees, but he was too famous to walk in. But he just was curious. And then the rest is history, as the Beatles, especially George Harrison, embraced the devotees. But who is doing this? Malati, Yamuna, these are women just out there preaching. So we're seeing here is something descriptive. It's not prescriptive. This is what you must be doing. I mean, it's not the example Prabhupada set, but there's nothing wrong with it. If somebody is a mother, a wife, taking care of the household, I know some women, that's all they want to do. And that's glorious too. We shouldn't condemn that in any way, nor should we say that that is the necessity for everyone. So one man's food is another man's poison, or to put it in another way, different slopes for different folks. And we find in women, if we look at IQs, let's look at IQs, let's look at the facts. We find on the very high end of IQ, there are some women who are just run circles around me. They're super smart women. But on the average, you're going to find more men with super high IQs, though some women can have it. Also, you're going to find on the other end, a lot more men with super low IQs. So men tend to be more on the extreme. Some are smarter, some are dumber. But any particular woman could be as dumb as a box of rocks or another Einstein. I mean, the president of my alma mater is not the stereotypical president. As an engineering school in New York. It's not the typical president you would expect. It's an Afro-American woman who has just been the best president the university ever had, and she's a nuclear physicist. So to say she shouldn't be doing that, she should be staying home, taking care of her husband, it's just absurd. It's just absurd. She's as smart as they make it. And we find, so we may say on the average, some women, we look at this IQ, but the point is we're personalists. As Ram Baru says, we're radical personalists. So we treat every woman and every man as an individual. And in the Gita, Krishna talks about what is really sinful. Sinful is to stop people from acting according to their nature. And so Arjuna was convinced by Krishna to act according to his nature. So if a woman's nature is to be a great preacher and to stop her is sinful on our part. And if a woman's nature is to be a homebody, to stop that is sinful on our part. Equally applies to men. And I know some men who are Mr. Moms who are wonderful at it. Wonderful at it. One case I know very well, this couple, he's Mr. Mom and she's a doctor, happiest couple. And there's nothing, so we must take each individual case, and that's precisely what Prabhupada did. Venkata, did I answer your question?
Thank you very much. Yes, you did. And you've given me lots to kind of mull over and think about. So thank you. I know it's a tough one. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. It's a good ninth canto question. My friend Chadaratma Prabhu, anything you'd like to add or subtract?
Well, you've certainly got more years of experience in the Grihastha ashram and service to Prabhupada than I could ever hope for. So I don't know what I could possibly add. You and your wife have been exemplary in your standard of how to be a Krishna conscious couple. So I'll behave
As
myself.
you and your wife have been. Very much
But
so.
we're following your footsteps.
No, I've always admired you and your wife, and you've been, you and your wife have such an extraordinary relationship because you take such good care of her. She had some health challenges, and every moment you're there for her, and she's there for you, pushing you out the door to go serve with Indradumna Swami. It's a beautiful relationship. I have the greatest admiration for it.
Well,
That's
we're
called
both
love.
fortunate in that sense by Prabhupada's grace to have married good daughters of his.
Yeah. Well, Pashupati's a especially good daughter. And sometimes I get a call from her. So-and-so needs a little help with this. What can you do? She had just like huge heart. And then, yeah, and in spite of difficulties and sometimes physical difficulty, encourage you to always be with Indradumna Swami. I just can't, this is a rare Kartik where Indradumna Swami is going on his prikram and you're sitting here.
Yeah, it's true.
I know, because I've been trying to keep up with him on
But to your point, it is a very good principle that a joint relationship and joint respect and service together is what will keep us from ending up like Yayati.
Exactly the point. If Yayati and Devyani had Krishna at the center, they wouldn't have to be telling he-goat and she-goat stories. It goes on later to talk about the she-goat, and the she-goat had beautiful hips, and the he-goat was so handsome. And they're talking about how even though they're goats, how they were particularly good-looking goats, and how they were sexually attracted to each other. It applies to humans. It applies to goats. I mean, why do peacocks have these big fans?
And it describes the particularly nice mustache and beard of the he-goat. I'm telling in this particular scenario.
Yeah, it is. It is a mustache and beard and everything. Because I think the goat was just following Chaturmasya. But anyway,
thank you for your request to say something, Hardball.
Thanks. We have time for maybe one more question. It's 8:00 now. I'm supposed to end timely. Is there one more question, comment, criticism, or better joke than I had? Anything? Going once, twice?
Prabhu.
Yes.
It's Andrea.
Hi, Andrea.
I just wanted to second what Venkata Prabhu just wrote in the chat about how inspiring it is to kind of hear from you as a devotee who has been a couple that's keeping Krishna in the center, and as well as the other Prabhu who was speaking, just because the majority of us in the movement are not going to be monastics, as Venkata Prabhu mentioned, and we are in relationships. And just that reminder that, as you said, it's not about giving up our relationships to others, but it's putting Krishna in the center and kind of just Krishna-izing them in a way is just so important to hear, and especially from people that have decades of experience, because a lot of times when we're talking to people about Krishna consciousness in the beginning, we can be very fanatical, and others can be very fanatical with us. And if we don't have these examples, a lot of times when I would go to 26 Second Avenue and go to classes there, the only people that would come speak were swamis or sannyasis. And I, as a beginner, got this mindset or this view that was the only thing that Krishna consciousness was about sannyasis, and had no clue that there were grihastas.
Oh boy. Oh
Like,
boy.
I mean, there was Subi and Atma, but it was that I thought that was it. Like, I didn't know that there was anybody else. So it's so important to hear from people like you. So thank you so much.
That's a very, very good point. Oh, I see my friend Kevin driving there. Hi, Paul, Kevin, nice to see you. He's on the way to fix a windshield. And Kevin, we just Adwaita Prabhu from Rutgers, who's been a professor of religion and for 4 decades an avid book collector, just donated his entire library to the Bhaktivedanta Institute library. We have 3,000 books. Now we're doubling to 6,000 books in Gainesville. And Kevin has volunteered to rent a U-Haul and drive it down this weekend. So I thank you again and again, Kevin. All of you, when you visit Gainesville, you can see we have this beautiful mansion that was donated to us that used to be the president's mansion. And we have a huge library in there. And science books, obviously, Vaishnav books, original Bhaktivinoda Thakur books, and we share the library with the Institute for Vaishnav Studies. So with that, we'll end here. Thank you all very much. It's a privilege and an honor to speak at the Bhakti Center. Things are going nicely there. We had our board meeting a few weeks ago, and I'm just, we have a good new management in place, and it's a material world, so there's always bumps on the royal road, but it's going great. Things are moving and expanding the concept of the Bhakti Center and ways to reach out more, and it's financially stable and all kinds of good things happening there. And I think it's starting to open up now to more public events, as I understand it. I hope to be there in December, Krishna willing, and we'll see some of you face to face. Okay, Hare Krishna. Have a good Krishna day, and remember, this is the month of Kartik, so everything you do devotionally, everything you do counts more. You chant, you'll find you get a little higher taste because it's just an auspicious time. And so if you're going to do something devotional, do it this month. It's a really good time to do it. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Brahmatirtha Prabhu. Wonderful presentation, very lively, interactive, practical. Thank you very much, and funny. Your jokes worked.
Oh, good. I got that in class success. One time I gave a class in Gainesville, and one young devotee, been there a few months, came to me and he said to me, I really liked your class, Prabhu. And I said, oh, what did you like about it? And he gave me the biggest compliment I've ever received. In fact, I know of no devotee who has ever received this compliment. Such a rare compliment. And he said to me, I've told the story before, and he said to me, I didn't fall asleep once. So that compliment, because we always have that lullaby, you know, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So if everyone stays awake, it's a good class. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Hare
thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhu. Thank you very much. Okay, Hare Krishna. This is it. Come again tomorrow, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Hare Bol.